If you're new to woodworking, let me show you an easy way to make a shaker cabinet door just using a table saw and a standard 10-inch blade. There are two common methods used today to make a shaker cabinet door. The first method utilizes a router table and a pair of router bits that are specifically designed to make doors. The other method utilizes a table saw with a stacked dado, which is a stack of blades that when added together removes large amounts of material quickly and cleanly, leaving a professional look and fit. But because you're just getting started, you probably don't have a router table or a dado set, and that's fine, because you can still build a great looking quality door without them. It's important to understand and know the difference between the door style and a door rail so that you can correctly measure and assemble the door. Cabinet rails, just like handrails on a porch, run horizontally, while the stiles run vertically. When assembled, the rails fit in between the stiles, and this is important to know so that you can cut your stiles and rails to the proper length. When it comes to the width of the stiles and rails, the standard size is about 2¼ inches. But depending on your specific overall cabinet or drawer size, anywhere between 2 and 2½ inches is acceptable. To get a quick estimate of the amount of material you need for each door, measure the height of the cabinet opening and multiply by 2, then measure the width and multiply that by 2. Measuring this way gives you a little extra material for mistakes and adjustments. To get started, rip the material down, if you need to your desired width. With that done, it's time to start cutting the stiles and rails to length. The stiles are easy as they are cut to the exact door height, which in my case is 23½ inches. The rails, on the other hand, are not cut to the exact door width and require a little bit more math to figure them out. The total door width needs to be 17½ inches. But if you remember, the rails fit in between the stiles. So you'll have to deduct for those and then add 2 3/8 tenons to each rail. Therefore, the math looks like this. The total door width, 17½ inches, minus 2 stiles at 2½ inches each, giving us a total of 12½ inches. Then we're going to add to that 3/4 inch for both tenons for a total rail length of 13¼ inches. And don't worry if you didn't follow that exactly, it'll all make sense once I start putting the door together. After cutting the stiles and rails to the proper length, it's time to run a groove in all 4 pieces. Raise your saw blade up to 3/8 inch and slide the fence over to align the blade in the center of the board. And don't worry, it doesn't have to be exactly center, just make it close. Once set up properly, run all 4 pieces through, carefully holding each board tight to the fence and tight to the table. Once all 4 pieces are done, grab a smaller scrap of the same material and run that through as well. So this scrap piece will actually be used as a test to get the exact location of the fence so that the groove is in the center and sized exactly to match the thickness of the plywood panel. The panel material that we're using on this project is about 1/4 inch thick, so we'll have to adjust the fence slightly to make our groove wider. With the adjustments made, make a second pass and this time flip the board end for end and run it through again. What this does is centers the groove, creating an equal amount of material on either side. With that done, it's time to check the fit with the plywood. It needs to be snug but not too tight. As you can see, we need to go back to the table saw and make another micro adjustment to the fence so that the groove is slightly bigger. Again, run one side, then flip the board and run it through again. This time around it seems to be a perfect fit, not too tight and not too loose. Now that we know that the test piece fits, it's time to run all the stiles and rails through. At this point, the 2 stiles are done. Now it's time to start milling the tenons on each end of the rails. To set up for that milling operation, the first thing you need to do is to add a scrap block of wood to the fence, about 2½ inches back from the blade. This block will be used as a guide to set the proper distance to cut the 3/8 tenons and to prevent kickback during the milling process. To get started, grab your test piece again and set it next to the blade. Slowly lower the blade down until you're just below the side wall of the dado. The next step is to make a 3/8 mark down from the end, which marks the total length of the tenon. With the fence loose, place the rail against the block and move the fence and the rail at the same time in or out to line up the blade with the 3/8 mark. It's a good idea to keep the blade slightly inbound of the pencil line to start. Once you're happy with your settings, lock the fence down. With the saw running, slide the rail over tight to the block and then advance the rail through the blade using the miter gauge. Now that the first pass is complete, flip the rail over and repeat the same process. With the tenon shoulders now cut, nibble away the remaining amount of material, creating the face of the tenon. Once complete, it's time to test the fit with the stiles, and as expected, it's a little too tight, and that's fine. Remember, you can always remove more material, but you can never put it back on. So now that we know that the tenon is too tight, it's back to the table saw. Raise the blade ever so slightly and repeat the same milling process as before. With a little effort this time, the tenon goes into the groove nicely. But another problem arises. See the gap here? To fix that, it's back to the table saw to adjust the fence away from the blade to make this tenon just a bit longer. With those adjustments made, you can see that the tenon is now bottoming out in the end wall and is fitting really well. Now that the test piece works and the adjustments on the saw are dialed in, run all 4 ends of the rails to create their tenons. I do want to make you aware that because we're not using a stacked dado, the single saw blade can leave some jagged marks on the joints. So if you're staining your doors, you may want to clean those up with a chisel, a plane, or even just some sandpaper wrapped around a block. Just make sure you clean those up before you dial your saw in, because this will affect the way your tenons fit. The last thing to do before assembling is to get the measurement for the 1/4 inch panel. To do that, loosely fit the rails to the stiles and make marks at each tenon location. Then measure between the 2 lines and subtract 1/8 of an inch. To get the width of the panel, subtract 1/8 of an inch from the total rail length, which includes the tenon. At the table saw, cut the plywood down to the correct dimensions. I do strongly recommend dry fitting everything before adding glue, just to make sure that everything looks good. Once you're confident, set the door parts between 2 clamps and glue one side of the door, making sure to get good coverage on all surfaces of the tenon. And there's no need to glue the panel, so gluing goes pretty quick. Now that the glue is on, assemble one side by pressing the tenons into the grooves, then slide the panel into place. From there, glue the remaining 2 tenons and press the whole assembly together. Be sure to tighten the clamps evenly and look to make sure that the door is also tight to the underside of the clamp. You don't want the door to ride up on the edge, creating a warp. If you do find a high side, lightly tap it down. The very last thing to check before the glue sets up is the squareness of the door. To do that, measure from one corner to the opposite corner and then do the same thing on the other corners. These numbers should be the same or close if your door is square. As long as you did a good job at cutting each individual piece so that they're the same size, once everything goes together, I don't think you're going to have any problems. Mine here is about a 1/16 of an inch off, and I'm not going to worry about it. Now that everything is flat and square, let the glue dry well before sanding everything down. Now, depending on what type of hardware you're going to be using on the door, you're going to want to do those milling operations first before any painting or staining begins. This door will be receiving European style hinges that are inset into the frame by drilling 35mm holes into the stiles. To lay out for those hinges, mark 4 inches down from the top and 4 inches up from the bottom. Then use a jig to locate the center lines for the correct amount of offset. From there, set up a 35mm Forstner bit in the drill press and drill 2 holes, making sure to drill to the proper depth. After paint or stain, follow the hinge manufacturer's directions for proper installation. Well, there it is, one complete shaker style door. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. See everybody next week.